The drama surrounding Canelo Alvarez versus Erislandy Lara was never just about a boxing match. It was about identity, expectation, and two sharply different philosophies colliding under the brightest lights. Long before the first bell rang, the fight had already divided fans, analysts, and purists into camps that argued not only about who would win, but about what boxing itself was supposed to look like. Power versus finesse, pressure versus patience, Mexico versus Cuba by way of the United States. And at the center of it all stood a young red-haired star carrying the weight of a nation on his shoulders, facing a master technician determined to prove that brilliance could not be bullied. Canelo Alvarez entered the fight as boxing's golden boy. Still in his early 20s, he had already built a resume that most fighters would envy at the end of their careers. His rise had been carefully constructed but undeniably earned, with punishing knockouts, disciplined body work, and an aura that suggested inevitability. To many fans in Mexico, Canelo was more than a champion. He was tradition reborn, a throwback to the relentless pressure fighters who walked opponents down and broke them piece by piece. Every appearance felt like a national event, and every victory reinforced the belief that he was destined for greatness. Yet beneath the praise lingered questions. Critics wonder how he would fare against a true defensive wizard, someone who could take away his rhythm and force him into uncomfortable territory. Erislandy Lara was the embodiment of that threat. A Cuban southpaw with a pedigree forged in the amateur system and refined in professional ranks, Lara represented everything Canelo supposedly struggled against. He was elusive, intelligent, and disciplined to the point of obsession. His footwork was light, his jab sharp, and his understanding of distance surgical. Where Canelo sought confrontation, Lara thrived on avoidance. Where Canelo planted his feet to deliver thunder, Lara glided just out of range, inviting frustration. To his supporters, Lara was boxing purity personified, a craftsman who relied on skill rather than brute force. To his detractors, he was too cautious, too content to win rounds without truly engaging. This fight was his chance to silence those doubts. As fight night approached, the tension was thick. Analysts broke down every angle, replaying old footage and debating hypothetical scenarios. Would Canelo's body punching slow Lara down? Could Lara's movement neutralize Canelo's pressure? The stakes felt enormous because the implications stretched beyond a single result. A decisive Canelo win would validate the narrative that pressure and power could overcome finesse. A Lara victory would send a message that boxing intelligence and discipline still reign supreme, even against the sport's most marketable stars. When the bell finally rang, the atmosphere inside the arena was electric. From the opening moments, the contrast in styles was unmistakable. The conclusion of Canelo Alvarez versus Erislandy Lara cannot be confined to a single verdict or a final scorecard, because its true ending did not happen when the last bell rang. It unfolded in the silence after the crowd's roar faded, in the arguments that erupted on the walk home, and in the years of debate that followed every replay and rewatch. This fight did not close a chapter so much as it opened a permanent discussion about how boxing is judged, remembered, and understood. It exists in that rare space where a bout becomes larger than the night it occurred, transforming into a reference point for everything that came after. What makes this fight endure is not controversy alone, but contrast. Two elite fighters entered the ring with completely different interpretations of dominance, each convinced that his way of winning was the truest expression of the sport. Canelo represented forward motion, physical presence, and a belief that a fight is claimed by the man willing to take ground and inflict damage. Lara represented restraint, distance, and the belief that a fight is won by intelligence, timing, and control. Neither approach was accidental, and neither was flawed in isolation. The problem, if it can even be called that, was that boxing forced these philosophies to compete under a single judging system that could not fully reconcile them. Canelo's victory became official, but official does not always mean definitive. For many, the decision felt like confirmation that aggression still rules the sport, that the fighter pushing the action will always have an advantage in close rounds. For others, it felt like a dismissal of skill that does not announce itself loudly, a punishment for subtlety in a sport that claims to reward precision. This divide is why the fight refuses to fade into the background. It was not a robbery so blatant that it could be dismissed, nor a win so clear that it could be accepted without question. It lived in the uncomfortable middle, where reasonable minds could disagree, and often did. For Canelo Alvarez, this fight became a crucible. It tested not only his chin and stamina, but his adaptability and mental resolve. He learned that elite movement could slow his pressure, that intelligence could complicate power, and that being the face of boxing meant carrying expectations into every exchange. The experience hardened him. In the years that followed, he refined his patience, improved his counterpunching, and learned to dismantle fighters who once would have troubled him. Lara did not stop Canelo's rise, but he helped shape it, forcing evolution through resistance rather than defeat. For Erislandy Lara, the fight became both validation and burden. It validated his belief that he belonged at the highest level, that his style could trouble even boxing's most celebrated stars. At the same time, it reinforced the frustration that would follow him throughout his career, the sense that brilliance without spectacle is often undervalued. Lara walked away knowing he had executed his plan, yet unsure if execution alone would ever be enough in a sport driven by momentum, emotion, and marketability. His performance became a case study in excellence without reward, admired deeply by purists and quietly dismissed by those who equate excitement with effectiveness. The lasting power of this fight lies in how it challenges fans to confront their own biases. When people rewatch it, they are not just watching punches thrown and missed. They are examining what they personally value. Do they reward the fighter who advances, even if he absorbs shots to do so? Do they reward the fighter who avoids damage, even if it means disengaging? The answers often say as much about the viewer as they do about the fighters. In this way, Canelo versus Lara becomes a mirror reflecting the subjective nature of boxing itself. Time has only sharpened this effect. As Canelo's career soared to even greater heights, some revisited the Lara fight to argue that it proved his resilience and willingness to take risks. Others revisited it to argue that it exposed the favoritism afforded to stars. Lara's later performances, steady and disciplined, reinforced a narrative that he was consistently difficult to beat, even if he was rarely rewarded with unanimous praise. The fight aged not as a relic, but as a living debate, evolving alongside the legacies of the men who fought it. In a sport often defined by knockouts and definitive moments, this fight stands out for its ambiguity. There was no single punch that decided it, no dramatic collapse, no moment where one fighter clearly broke the other. Instead, it was decided in inches, angles, and interpretations. That subtlety is precisely why it frustrates some and fascinates others. Boxing, at its core, is not just violence. It is judgment, and judgment, by nature, is imperfect. The conclusion, then, is not about declaring a rightful winner once and for all. It is about recognizing that this fight represents the tension at the heart of boxing. The sport claims to reward skill, yet thrives on aggression. It celebrates defense, yet markets offense. It honors technique, yet sells spectacle. Canelo Alvarez versus Erislandy Lara forced all of these contradictions into the ring at the same time and asked the judges, the fans, and history itself to choose. The answer was split then, and it remains split now. Perhaps the most honest conclusion is that both men were right, and both were limited by the same system. Canelo was right to press, to invest in the body, and to assert himself physically. Lara was right to move, to counter, and to refuse unnecessary exchanges. They fought the fight they believed would win, and neither betrayed his identity in pursuit of approval. That commitment to self is why the fight resonates. It was not a compromise, it was a collision. In the broader story of boxing, this fight serves as a reminder that greatness is not always neat. The most memorable bouts are not always the cleanest, the most decisive, or the most celebrated. Sometimes they're the ones that linger, that provoke argument, that refuse to settle quietly into the archives. Canelo versus Lara belongs firmly in that category. It is remembered not because everyone agrees on it, but because no one ever fully will. As the years continued to pass, new fans will discover the fight without the noise of the original build-up, watching it with fresh eyes and forming their own conclusions. Some will side with pressure, others with precision, and the cycle will continue. That ongoing relevance is the true measure of its importance. Long after belts have changed hands and careers have ended, this fight remains alive, suspended in debate, untouched by consensus. In the end, the final word on Canelo Alvarez versus Erislandy Lara is that there is no final word. It is a fight that belongs as much to discussion as it does to history, a reminder that boxing is as much about interpretation as it is about impact. And perhaps that is its greatest legacy, a single night that proved boxing does not always